بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه واتبع هداه وبعد. So we covered already many tools when it comes to a spiritual reading of the Quran. We had an introduction and then we added these tools. The first one was capturing the awe of Allah. Just to recap what we did before. And the second was responding. And the third, reflecting. And then we talked about healing. And last time we talked about memorizing, right?
Yes.
And today we're coming to the last one, which is practicing. Who can remind me of what we did last time when it comes to memorizing? We said that there are 3 steps that we can use here.
Agree, recall, and act.
Good. So when it comes to memorizing, we're not literally talking about memorizing the whole Quran, but at least some passages and some ayat that we need to do 3 things with them. To engrave in our hearts and inscribe them on the heart and mind, and then recall them whenever possible, whenever needed, and then act upon them. This is the era. So this is how memorizing the Quran could help in meditating on the Quran. So the Quran would help us formulate the way we think, and the way you think will affect the way we behave. And we mentioned many examples of some texts that should be memorized by every Muslim to provide guidance in different situations. Today we'll be talking about practicing. And of course, this is the essence of all of what we're doing. This is the essence of the meditative process of the Quran. To practice and to put in practice everything we reflected on. Of course, here we also see we practiced a lot here too. When we captured the awe of Allah, that is part of practicing. Because this is a way of receiving the text to affect and to influence the heart. And here responding, we also gave 3 ways of responding. And reflecting, 3 ways on driving meaning from the ayat. And healing, this is also using the Quran. And memorizing, it's about using the Quran. But practicing here will refer to 3 areas. So if you examine the Quran, you will find 3 kinds of commands in the Quran. So in the Quran, because in order to practice something, you have to know it first. So this step assumes that there is a meaning that you have already reached. So, and we talked about all of these before. Now, you could have some direct commands in the Quran addressing the believers. So this is direct commands to the believers. So this is an area that relates to us that we need to practice. And there are some, you can say, indirect commands. And these are the commands that addresses non-Muslims in the Quran. These are also indirect to us. Because you should not limit yourself to the ayat addressing the believers when it comes to practicing the Quran. Otherwise, you will be having very, very limited space of what you need to practice. There are a lot of things that we'll need to practice and to reflect on that are originally addressing non-Muslims or previous nations. There are commands, so commands that are indirect. And we have commands that are implied. So comments that are implied like what? These are, we can say, some stories. So the stories have implied comments in them. You see, for example, some promises that you follow. You see in the Quran some warnings to avoid. You see statements. So these are all in the form of statements. It's not direct commands, but you can derive a command from them. And we'll have examples. So these are the three, again, what we did before is a very clear way of practicing, but here we're talking about commands. So these are the three types of commands you could find in the Quran. Something directly addressing the believers, do this and do not do this. An example would be the 90 vocative ayat in the Quran that starts with Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. I think there are 90 ayat in the Quran that starts with Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. If you need Arabic work on that, Sheikh Abu Bakr al-Jazairi has a book called, I think, Nida'at al-Rahman. Something in Nida'at al-Rahman. So these are the vocative ayat address starting with Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu used to say, whenever you hear Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, far'aha sam'ak, then pay very close attention. He said, فَإِنَّهُ إِمَّا خَيْرٌ تُؤْمَرُ بِهِ أَوْ نَهْيٌ أَوْ شَرٌ تُنْهَى عَنْهُ. Because Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu will be either followed by something good that you must follow, or something bad that you must avoid. So this is very clear. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, do this. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, do not do this. Now we have some indirect ayat, indirect commands. It's not addressing the believers, but you're still included. يعني مثلا, take for example ayat, these are some ayat talking about al-munafiqun. The ayah from Surah At-Tawbah, ayah 67. It says, وَالْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ بَعْضُهُم مِّن بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمُنكَرِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَقْبِضُونَ أَيْدِيَهُمْ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَنَسِيَهُمْ إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. This is in Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 10, ayah 67. As we mentioned before, we're reading the ayat very slowly. Yes, it is absolutely talking about the hypocrites, but still it is addressing me and you. How? By looking at the qualities that Allah associates with the hypocrites. Because you may see some of these qualities applied to you. I'm not here saying you will be called a hypocrite, or if someone is suffering from a quality like this, we'll call them a hypocrite, and we'll apply these ayat that are revealed addressing the non-Muslims and apply them on Muslims and say these are not Muslims anymore. No, we're taught these are red flags. I am reading these ayat and these qualities as red flags to avoid. So it says, for example, here the translation is, the hypocrites, both men and women, are all the same. They order what is wrong and forbid what is right. And they are tight-fisted, meaning they do not donate, they do not help people financially. وَيَقْبِضُونَ أَيْدِيَهُمْ نَسُوا اللَّهِ, they have ignored Allah. فَنَسِيَهُمْ, and so Allah has ignored them. إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. The hypocrites are the disobedient ones. So how do I see myself in this? I see red flags that I should not be coming close to. يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمُنكَرِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمَعْرُوفِ. Yeah, there are some people who are really commanding evil and forbidding good. That is not what a believer is supposed to do. وَيَقْبِضُونَ أَيْدِيَهُمْ. When it comes to charity, they are, as the ayah says, tight-fisted. They cannot open up their hands to give charity. That is an attribute of hypocrisy. because it contradicts the idea of full iman. If I have full iman, then the idea of giving should be easier. And it says, نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَنَسِيَهُمْ. They ignored or neglected Allah. They do not remember Allah. So Allah does not remember them. So what is the point here? The point here is when you forget Allah, when you forget about Allah, you're having a step towards the hypocrite's camp, let's say. So this is another ayah. It's also about charity. It gives you some one of the aspects of the attitudes of the hypocrites. This is in Surah Al-Munafiqun, ayah 7. It says, هم الذين يقولون لا تنفقوا على من عند رسول الله حتى ينفضوا. The hypocrites are the ones who say to one another, do not spend anything on those immigrants with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet of Allah, so that they will break away from him. So this is putting financial pressure on some people to give up on their principles. We see this in the world of politics every day. Do not support them financially so that they surrender. This is what they did. This is what the ayah is saying. Do not spend anything on those immigrants with the Prophet of Allah so that they will break away from him. وَلِلَّهِ خَزَائِنُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. If we would translate this wow, it says, but to Allah alone belong the treasures of the heavens and the earth. This wa, which is translated here as but to Allah, it could be translated as the irony. The irony here is that everything belongs to Allah. And when you're helping somebody, as I said before, how much would you give to impress Allah? It's not about impressing Allah. It's more about, it is a test. This small exercise shows us what is in your heart. Shows what your heart treasures the most. So here they are commanding people not to help others, and they are saying so that they break away from the Prophet, but they forgot that everything belongs to Allah. وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ. Yet the hypocrites do not comprehend. They do not understand this idea that the money they have is not to control people or not to determine people's way of life, but it is actually a test. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of this money and they are entrusted with it. So you hear some ayat addressing the hypocrites, but you still can have a share in this. You have ayat talking about the people who yasudduna an sabilillah, who are turning people away from the path of Allah. And these are being addressed as the disbelievers. But in our life, you can see people who are literally turning people away from Allah because of the way they teach the deen, because of the extreme teachings they spread. So these are parts of yasudduna an sabilillah. Remember when ISIS started? Now they are saying it's all intelligence making. It was made by some intelligence agents to achieve some political gains. But when they did, they burned some people alive. And in the khutbah, I remember a few years ago, in the khutbah I said, I can never imagine that this is the act of a human being, let alone a Muslim. And wallah, I remember one day I had a group here, and one non-Muslim group, and they were asking this question, and I said, why do we, I am answering your question, assuming that what we hear in the news is true. But what if in few years, someone would write in his memorials that, wallahi, this is the agent's work and it is done because of this, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is what we hear nowadays. You have literally, I forgot the name, I have one of the Islamists, the extremists, whose beard was like this. I forgot his name. And in few years, he shaved it and said, I tricked you. And he was the imam giving the khutbah in Arabic. We jihad, we have to kill, we have to do. At the end, he's shaving it and said, my 2 years with Al-Qaeda, my 2 years with ISIS, my 1 year with Batikh. So that's why people get very emotional when they see someone yani, with a long beard and say, khalas, you're now a trusted resource. No, that long beard could be a crisis, not a trust. كنا بنقول إيش؟ So,
talking about munafiqun.
huh?
Talking about munafiqun.
We're talking about the idea of the hypocrites, just because they apparently. Now, the reason I mentioned this is they are turning people away from the path of Allah, right? But what did the Prophet ﷺ do? How did the Prophet deal with the hypocrites? These ayat are talking about people that Allah told the Prophet that these are hypocrites. Hypocrites here does not mean someone who lies or someone who breaks a promise. This is hypocrisy in faith, meaning someone who's acting as if he's a Muslim but he is not. So he's hiding his kufr. So, and this is more dangerous than someone who's openly kafir back then, because this is someone who can really hurt you the most. And these are people that Allah knows that they are not Muslims. But how did the Prophet behave with them, deal with them? He did not kill them, because these are, in the world of politics, what they are doing is not just spying. This is high treason. That if anyone in this world is accused of, you have to get them done, because they are like literally killing you and putting the whole community into big danger. But what did the Prophet ﷺ do? The Prophet ﷺ did not punish them, did not kill them. He said, because I do not want people to say Muhammad is killing his companions. Because people from the outside do not know the details. So here the Prophet cares about the image of Islam. The image, yes, the image is, someone deserves to be killed and will not kill them because of something else. Because it could lead to a bigger disaster. What is the bigger disaster? Distorting the image of Islam. Giving people a chance to formulate a negative picture of Islam. Is that good enough to stop this rule? Yes, it is good enough. This is in the world's, in the Prophet's own judgment. He said, I will not mete out that punishment, because people from the outside will see only them as Muslims and they will see me as killing my companions. That's why in Islam, yes, in Islam, the president has the veto. Yes, you can have the veto to stop an act, because based on your information that the public do not know, you can, this good deed of applying the punishment could lead to disasters. So the idea of the veto is legitimized, but they abuse it nowadays. But anyway, what I am trying to say is, there could be some ayat addressing non-Muslims, and still it relates to us in greater sense. There are also some ayat that's not saying do and do not do. These are ayat in the form of statements. Allah does this, Allah says this, or stories, or promises, or warnings. Here you can, in stories, you may have some examples to follow, some examples to avoid, some promises in the Quran. And this class can really turn into like 1 year project, if we would just elaborate on this, the 90 ayat addressing Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, and the ayat addressing non-Muslims, and the implied lessons of the Quran, this could be a Quran project. Thus, I am trying to give you hints on what your relationship with the Quran would be. So, who read the story of Adam and the shaitan in the Quran? Many people ask me, how would this relate to me? I mean, it is an event that has never been repeated before, and how would it relate to me as a Muslim, as a person? And I would say, this is actually, if you would single out one story from the Quran and say, you know what, just give me one story, because I don't have enough time, just one story to reflect on, of all of the stories of the prophets in the Quran, I would pick this story, the story of Adam and Eve, or Adam and the shaitan. Why? Because it is literally about me and you. All of the stories of the prophets, as I mentioned in the khutbah before, are about a group of people who are calling others to Allah, worship Allah the One, be good, there is a day of judgment, and then you have big conflict, and then torture and tribulations and persecutions, and at the end, the believers are victorious. This is the stories. And yes, it is repeatable, because this is, as the Quran says, this is sunnatullah. Sunnatullah means Allah's way, or even you can say Allah's law. This is the law of Allah. There are some laws that are consistent. And we do not judge. And these stories in the Quran would take decades, sometimes 80 years, to unfold the sunnah of Allah. So if you see someone escaping his punishment in this dunya, remember that the story may not be complete. Even in this life, may take one more century to unfold. So, what about the story of Adam and Eve? The story of Adam and Eve is about, and I think I mentioned this here before, is about what I called Adam nature and satanic nature. If we can make up a word and say Adamic nature, it may rhyme better. So what is the central quality that Adam has in his story? In my opinion, the central quality that distinguished Adam from the shaitan is one prayer he made. He said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Our Lord, we wronged ourselves. And if you do not show mercy and forgiveness on us, we will be among those who are in big loss. This is the ayah that distinguishes Adam from the shaitan. And by the way, Adam had many excuses that he could have used and say it is not my fault. But he acknowledged his part and he directly said, I did it wrong, forgive me. Even the Quran would give some hints to Adam that it's not his absolute fault. فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَ الشَّيْطَانِ. The shaitan whispered to them. Adam did not say, oh God, the shaitan whispered to me. There is an ayah that says, وَقَاسَمَهُمَا إِنِّي لَكُمَا لَمِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ, which means the shaitan made an oath to them, to Adam and Eve, that I am a good counselor for you. Adam did not use it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, as the shaitan thought, فَدَلَّهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ, he deceived them, basically. So Adam did not say, oh Allah, it was the whisperings of the shaitan, it was the deception of the shaitan, it was the oath of the shaitan. He didn't mention any of these excuses. He claimed responsibility for the end result of all this story, and he said, very shortly, very briefly, I wronged myself, forgive me. And remember when we talked about good apology, I had a class before about the characteristics of a good apology. We said it has to be brief and without any excuses and without introductions. It is clear, brief, and to the point, and there is a request that something that indicates that you're sorry, and a request for forgiveness in very clear terms. You know, we sometimes say, I am sorry, but what comes after but would make your apology requiring another apology sometimes, because it could hurt. So this is what the central teaching in the surah, in the story about Adam. The reason I am saying this, because we also have the attitude of the shaitan. What did the shaitan do? Say, said, would I prostrate before someone that you created from dust and you created me from fire? And he said also, أنا خير منه, I am better than him. And what is worse, he said, أنظرني إلى يوم يبعثون. Just give me more time till they are resurrected. So someone is saying, I am wrong, forgive me. And someone is saying, basically, just give me time and I will not change. Give me time and I will deceive all of them. After this, you're saying the story does not relate to me and you. This is me and you. The question is, there are some people who are following the way of the shaitan. They do not acknowledge their mistakes. And some people are following the way of Adam. When they do wrong, they acknowledge it and they are ready to fix it. Yeah. So that is, to me, the central story in the Quran when it comes to belief and faith. So again, you read the Quran in this different way and it will really change your mind. You're not just reading a story. You're putting yourself in the story. Are you choosing the way of Adam or the way of the shaitan? Yes, this is the story of Adam. You will have it's mentioned in the Quran, I think 6 or 7 times, maybe 6 times. So if you can gather all of these incidents and reflect on them in this way and see what path are you following. So again, direct comments, indirect comments, implied comments. There are warnings. You will see. We're running out of time, but we'll move to another point, which is, okay, how can I practice? You can say, just do it. It says, do this, do it. But this is not what we're going to do. We'll reflect on Surah Al-Fatiha to know the steps of really putting the commands into practice. Surah, every day I become very convinced that Surah Al-Fatiha deserves more and more attention. It's like a summary of the whole Quran, and it is put in front of you. In the beginning of the Quran, summarizes everything. So, are there any hints from Surah Al-Fatiha that would help me? How can I apply a text? So, from text to application. Surah Al-Fatiha has 3 major parts. The first part is about Allah. The second part is a covenant. And the last part is a prayer for guidance. These are the 3 major parts of Surah Al-Fatiha. So, and the covenant here we have So here we have Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. So here we have the first three ayat. And it talks about who Allah is. Allah is being here described as the Lord of the worlds, the merciful, the ever merciful, the master of the day of judgment. So this is Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran. The first chapter. It starts with introducing who Allah is. The Lord of the worlds, the merciful, the ever merciful, master of the day of judgment. Is this important in learning? Yes. Because here we learn that the first step to put everything in practice is to know Him. To know Allah. And then what does the second says? The second one says, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. We worship you alone. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And we seek help from you alone. So what do we get from إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ? This is a decision. And it follows necessarily from knowing Allah. If you really believe that there is God, and He is the Lord of the worlds, and He is the merciful, the ever merciful, and there is a day of judgment, it necessarily follows that you're His. And this is the second. So know Him, and the second is be His. Be His servant. Be His servant. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. We worship you alone. So this is your declaration, and it is based on of knowing Allah. And you remember when we said that it describes Allah in the second person. Oh Allah, we know, we worship. You are the Lord of the worlds. You are the merciful, the ever merciful. You are the master of the day of judgment. And then it didn't say we worship. He is the Lord of the worlds. He is the merciful, the ever merciful. He is the master of the day of judgment. And then we worship you alone. That change in pronoun is because of the change in thought. Since you know that these are His attributes, you also make that commitment to worship Him. But worship will not be possible without expressing your desire for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for guidance. So here we say, you need to desire guidance. And basically seek help. So when I have a commandment, before you think of doing it, you have to pray and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you help. When you express that desire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you more. So first, I acknowledge that. I acknowledge this commandment. And second, the first thing that comes to your mind is not you. It's still Allah who can guide me, who can help me. That's why the Prophet ﷺ advised Mu'adh ibn Jabal. And he said, after each prayer, say, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Right? Oh Allah, assist me. A'inni. It comes from this nasta'in, from the awn. Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrik wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, help me to remember you, thank you, and worship you well. That should be a dua added to your du'as. Do not rely on your help or in your power or in your conventions. Rely still on the help of Allah, because this is part of worship. That's why scholars ask, why do we need إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ even though it's part of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ? Because seeking His help is part of worshiping Him. And usually when something like this happens in the Quran, it's to place more emphasis on that aspect of worship. Because this is the originator of worship. asking for help. And as I said, the Prophet ﷺ signaled that as a piece of advice for Mu'adh ibn Jabal. That's why, it's recommended that when you hear the adhan, you repeat the words of the adhan, right? Except in one case. Hayya ala salah, which means come to prayer. What do we say? We're commanded to say La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, which means there is no power or might except that which comes from Allah. Which is basically, it's not just a statement, it basically means, oh Allah, give me that power, give me that might, give me that energy to go and do the salah. So when it comes to practicing and applying, what first comes to your mind? Is it your power? You may be disappointed. It is Allah's ista'ana. And by the way, when you're always seeking help, you will not give up, even if you fall. But when you rely on your own abilities, you will be disappointed. So this is a key. Remember when we said the first hikmah of Ibn Ata'illah, what was it? What is the first hikmah? من علامة الاعتماد على العمل نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. He said, one of the signs of relying on your deeds, meaning for gaining heaven, is the loss of hope when you slip. Because we rely on Allah and on the mercy of Allah for gaining Jannah. So why do you give up when you sin? Because you were actually relying on your actions and you think now you do not fit. He said, if you're really relying on Allah's mercy, you would have never given up. Because Allah is still there and you need to illustrate this aspect of worship again. This is one of the greatest hikmahs I have ever read. Because it gives people hope and at the same time it exposes the secret sins, the hidden sins that we're not aware of. It's very beautiful. Because when I think of these hikam, it's amazing. نعم.
Can you repeat it? بالعربي.
من علامة الاعتماد على العمل نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. من علامة الاعتماد على العمل نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. One of the signs of reliance on your actions, meaning for salvation, is the loss of hope when you slip. These are people who really walked the way, as someone said, and they came back to tell us how you walk the way. If there are any constructions, any obstacles in your way, what direction you should take. They save you a lot of time and a lot of trouble. You do not have to go through the same story over and over again, and we saw millions of people doing it, whether succeeding or being misguided. So the first step, in order to really put the Quran in practice and these commands in practice, I will develop more knowledge of Allah. Because the more I know Allah, the more authentic I become as a servant. And when you become a servant, you become God-oriented. This is the key word. That's why I start in worship by seeking help from Allah to help me. When you express that desire, because eventually everything you're doing, as we mentioned before, depends on Allah's providence, on Allah's imdad. The most important thing we have is the desire. You desire worship, Allah will enable you to do the act of worship. You desire disobedience, because you can never do anything without Allah's help anyway. But it's that human nature. It's the human nature. When it appears, Allah will guide it and misguide it. But it all goes back to your own choice. So does it stop there? No, it does not stop there. After you do and practice, you're still asking for guidance. Here it says, guide us unto the straight path. So after you put it in practice, you're still interested in seeking guidance. Guidance to remain doing what you're doing, and guidance for Allah to show you what you're missing. Are you there? Are you finished? No, there are two warnings. In this dua, so actually one advice and two warnings. One advice is guide us unto the straight path, the path of those you have blessed. So we can say here, associate yourself with people who can help you throughout the path. And two warnings, not the path of those you're displeased with. This is interpreted as the people who know but not apply. وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ, those who went astray. And this is interpreted as those who do not apply because they do not know. So this is some hints we get from Surah Al-Fatiha if you want to put these commands in practice. That's why you will never wonder how quick the Sahaba to apply these commands. If you look in the Quran, you know the ayah in Surah An-Nur, ayah 22, that says, Surah An-Nur, ayah 22, وَلَا يَأْتَلِ أُولُو الْفَضْلِ مِنْكُمْ وَالسَّعَةِ أَن يُؤْتُوا أُولُو الْقُرْبَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْمُهَاجِرِينَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. This ayah is addressing, in the tafsir, addressing Abu Bakr to forgive Mustah ibn Uthatha. This man is the man who who really did a lot of harm to Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha and her reputation. The ayah, and Abu Bakr used to support him financially. This ayah was revealed to say, do not stop your financial help for them and forgive. Don't you want to gain Allah's forgiveness? And when Abu Bakr heard this, he decided to continue right away. Even though this is someone who really hurt his family the most. We also see Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu in a gathering. He was addressed by a man called Uyayna ibn Hisn. And this man came to Umar and said, وَاللَّهِ مَا تُعْطِينَا الْجَزْلِ وَلَا تَحْكُمُ فِينَا بِالْعَدْلِ. You do not give us abundantly, and you do not judge us justly. This is Umar. Umar is known as the just. Some people say, no, justice is defined as Umar. To emphasize it. But Umar here is getting very angry, and he was reminded of this ayah. خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. So be forgiving and stay away from the ignorant. And he right away magically calmed down. What is the point? The point here is that they are ready to respond very positively right away. Why? Because they know Allah, they have a covenant, and they are mindful of that covenant.
Yeah. I had a question about Surah Al-Fatiha. Is there a reason it says Sirat al-Ladhina an'amta alayhim instead of Sirat Allah, for example? So why does it say Sirat al-Ladhina an'amta alayhim instead of like Sirat Allah?
Very good. Thank you. What's your name?
Hisham.
Hisham. So Hisham is asking, why does it say in Surah Al-Fatiha, guide us to the straight path, the path of the people you have blessed. And it didn't say the path of Allah. The reason is to emphasize this. Allah defined the path, as Ibn al-Qayyim said, by showing you the people who are following the path so that you associate yourself with them. Allah did not say the path of prayer or fasting. But if you really want to follow the path of Allah, you have to associate yourself with the people of this path. So this is very practical. It's not theoretical. It's not the path of Allah. The path of Allah is the path of the people of Allah. Meaning you cannot survive alone. Because if you're only following the path of Allah alone, you will feel that lonely. So associate yourself with the good gathering so that you do not feel lonely. ماشي? Thank you. This is a good question. Jazakallah khair. We have the same thing also with Abu Talha al-Ansari. He donated his the well that was very close to the masjid, and this is very, very costly well, and he donated it when he heard about the ayah that says لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not attain piety until you donate part of what you love. So he said, the most beloved thing to me is that well, and this is what I am going to donate. What would make them be quick and be passionate about, not just quick, passionate about applying these commands? It's this idea. They know Allah, they know Him, they are His, they seek His help, they are mindful of the idea of guidance. This is how, same thing with Abu al-Dahdah, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. And he also was quick to apply this. Same thing also even legally. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 232. And this happened with Ma'qil ibn Yasar. So, his sister got married and then got divorced. And this was revocable divorce. Her husband wanted her back. And she agreed to go. But him as the wali, he said no, she will not go back. He divorced her, they will not be reunited. No. And this ayah was revealed and says, وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَبَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ. When you divorce the wives, and they reached their waiting period, they finished it, فَلَا تَعْضُلُوهُنَّ أَن يَنكِحْنَ. Do not stop them from going back to their husbands. We know there are three chances, right? So do not stop them to be reunited in marriage again if they agree bil-ma'ruf. So when he heard this ayah, he said, الْآنَ أَفْعَلْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Now I will do. You're talking about some people who are coming, let's say yesterday they were worshipping the idols. And they have completely different social norms with just one command. And we know what happened with forbidding alcohol. We have Umar ibn al-Khattab crying out saying, Ya Allah, reveal something very decisive about this. And when the ayah about forbidding drinking was revealed, it says the streets of Medina were like flooding, meaning everyone throw away what they have. What is the secret behind this? It's Surah Al-Fatiha, I would say. I mean, the idea is in Surah Al-Fatiha. Knowing Allah, know Him, be His, seek help, and be mindful of the of guidance. Allah Ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa jazakum Allah khairan.